Oh, there you go.
Okay, we are live, Luca.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session. If you are there, give us a sign on the chat, give us a thumb up, let us see that you are there. And let's start. This session today is about adopting Agile at scale and achieving agility at scale with an approach that is based on principles, instead of using an approach based on scaled framework. So we are talking about the scaling agile, but what do we mean with the scaling agile? During this presentation with scaling agile, we will intend scaling a small software or product development effort from one small agile team to a larger multi-team initiative. Or with scaling, we mean going from a small and agile organization, maybe a small startup, to a large and still agile organization, or adopting agile in an existing large organization, large and traditional non-agile organization, and adopting agile everywhere. So next. This is the agenda of the session today. We will start with the presentation. Giovanni very soon will introduce and talk about some of the typical challenges and problems of scalings. And then we will present our alternative based on principles. At the end of this session, we will spend about 15 minutes talking about...
Luca?
Yeah? Can you hear me?
I think Luca got some technical issues.
Yeah. So we will... Can you hear me?
Yeah. It's me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, merda.
So give us a sign on the chat. Can you hear me on chat? Okay, let's go on. I will mention that we will continue with the Q&A at the end of the session. There are many contributors. There are many contributors to these principles, many contributors from the Agile community that contributed to the principles that we are presenting. Let's introduce myself. Give me just a second. We lost Giovanni during the presentation. Just a second, please. That was not expected. So let me introduce myself very quickly. I'm working with Agile since the very beginning of the Agile movement between 2001 and 2002. And I work with a lot of different organizations that adopted Lean and Agile principle in software development. And then I work in settings with multiple teams, multiple products, and the whole organization. As I mentioned before, start posting your question and answer on time all through the presentation, and we will ask your questions. We will answer your question at the end. Giovanni, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Do you
over the slide and go ahead.
Do you want me to share again?
Yeah.
Okay, let me share. Oh no, you share the slides. I go over these ones. Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Okay. So this is what we call the loops of doom. So this is a typical example of a situation which our principles help to address. So imagine a complex system that has been around for a while. So we are talking about this, one of the examples Luca talked before. So a system already a large one, it's been already there for a while. So there is some accidental complexity in it. The software is not perfect. There is a big backlog size because the stakeholders want lots of stuff, lots of functionality to be implemented, and also aggregated product concerns means that the product has grown so much that actually there are several parts of the system that could be seen as like potentially different services. Yeah, that could be not necessarily related to each other. Okay, so this is a typical situation. And usually in this kind of situation, what happens is that, next Luca, please, is that the progress is quite slow. So if you have worked in any large-scale situation, you must have seen this. So there is slow progress, people saying, you know, we got lots to do, and we're under tight deadlines. So how do we solve this? So typical solution to this problem, next Luca, please, is add more people, with the idea of the more people we add, the more teams we have, the more they will, we can split the work among them so they can go in parallel and go faster. Unfortunately, is sometimes something else happens, that is lots of communication overhead. So basically, when you add more people or more teams, what happens in practice is that there will be more people talking to each other, more teams that need to synchronize. And so the communication overhead has an interesting side effect if you look at the next slide. And that is actually what you end up with is a situation where you have even slower progress because of the communication overhead, and also more accidental complexity because more people talking basically can lead to also lots of misunderstandings and situations where basically what is done is not done in an optimal way. So, and these loops somehow reinforce each other. So it becomes a bad situation that feeds on itself. Yeah. Next.
So this is the solution that we are proposing. When organization typically try to scale Agile using scaled framework, typically they start to get into a set of common problems. It's like walking a mile with someone else's shoes, a wrong size shoes. It becomes painful after a while, right? So instead, we suggest a completely different approach to use principles in order to do what fits your company unique context and principles, what fit exactly your company unique context and what works well for you. And the idea is to drive the initiative of scaling Agile guided by these principles. So if you're starting from scratch, you will start using the principles from the beginning. Instead, if you are not so lucky and your company maybe adopted SAFe, oh my God, or some techniques suggested by McKinsey, you can still use the principles to re-energize your initiative and to redirect the effort where they make the biggest impact. So let me give you some more details. Here you see this federated wiki where Giovanni and myself documented all the principles. And we are suggesting you to browse the principles right now during the presentation. You see the QR code on the corner of the screen, and you also see the URL p2.fed.wiki. So please open on your browser the document now and navigate it through the presentation. On the first page on the left, you see the link at the bottom of the page, Agile at Scale Generative Principles. Click that link. A second page will open side by side, and that page will be the page with the principles. There you will find two links with the two parts of the principles, part 1 and part 2. Indeed, the principles are grouped into different parts. And then you can click part 1, for example. You will find the list of all the principles, and you can click every single principle to get the complete detail, the references, and the explanation. So now, if you can, give us a thumb up on the chat to signal that you successfully opened the page. So I'm waiting some thumb up on the chat to check that you managed to successfully open the page on your browser, p2.fed.wiki. Okay, I'm giving you some more time to open the browser. Give us some thumb up when you're done so we can understand when we can move ahead. I already mentioned that the principles are organized broadly in two parts. The first part is about unwinding the dependency spiral that Giovanni already started to introduce, and testing the precondition of scaling. The second part is about collaborating at scale. And here we go with Giovanni that is introducing us with the first part. I think we lost Giovanni, so let me jump in. Give him a second.
Hear me?
Let me quickly. Oh,
can you hear me?
Yeah, are you back?
Okay, sorry, I don't know what is happening to my network today. I apologize, but anyway, it's back. So
perfect timing for you to start part 1.
So part 1, the principles to the rescue. So this is an introduction to the first 4 principles. That is, basically they say that scaling up is not always the best answer. Yeah, often descaling the problem is often a better one, or at least is a good first step. Yeah. Next. So the first principle is what we call the fundamental law of scaling. Yeah, which says that actually scaling amplifies the bad and makes the good more difficult. So in short, it tells you that when you try to scale, even if you will do that because you want to go faster or do more, there is always a price. There is always a price to pay. So specifically, all problems are amplified. So for example, if communication channels are a bottleneck, adding more people, more teams will make them more of a bottleneck. Yeah. If you have problems with teams sharing code, stepping into each other's toes already, and pull requests and stuff like this will become much worse. But also, everything that is already working well will require a bigger effort to keep working well. So, for example, if you have a beautiful continuous integration pipeline, everything is fine, works nicely, very smooth, as you add more teams, you probably have to be careful there because you may need to add more environments for the private testing of these teams, making sure that the commits to the shared pipeline still work well and things go smoothly. So doesn't matter the fact that you are working well or not, still you will have to make a bigger effort, a proportionally bigger effort to keep things going smoothly. Okay, and if you are doing something wrongly, you'll have bigger problems. So next. So as we see here, this is just the first example. So in the first example is a typical situation where the scaling up was done with where the conditions were not right. So instead of trying to look at what the real problem were for the slow progress, yeah, what happened was add more teams, more people, and the effect was basically paying the price, yeah, amplifying the bad. What was already a bad situation became worse. This is basically what the first example was showing us. Next. So a better approach, that is our principles 2 and 3, so you can see them in the wiki, is tackling the problems in a different way. So here there is reduce accidental complexity, decouple distinct products, and reduce feature load. So what do we mean with this? So the first one, reduce accidental complexity. Basically, refactor the code and the architecture, yeah, so that is better, that in a way that makes easier to manage the system and to evolve it and to maintain. Yeah, add automation, especially test automation. One of the problems we see again and again in these large-scale efforts is that a big, gigantic bottleneck is often the fact that there is no test automation in place, but there is an army of testers doing manual tests by following some scripts. Yeah, add automation for those things. So make the system easier to maintain and evolve. Then, if the system has been there for a while and you have several and offer several services potentially different from each other, you know, there is this tendency. I think there was, I can't remember now the name of the law, but basically it said that every software system grows until it's able to read emails. Yeah. So often when a system has been there for a while, we start seeing that offer lots of different services that are actually distinct in nature, even if there is a correlation. Well, sometimes splitting these things and giving these services to different teams basically will help the coupling the system and will help to have more autonomous teams working on it. And then reduce the feature bloat. This is another big problem. People want their systems to do a lot. Actually, the best approach here is to focus on what is really important for the users. Focus on the core. Yeah, don't remove the bells and whistles. Work in a way that actually the services offered are things that are really needed and used. Yeah, these will reduce the backlog by a lot and will help in reducing the pressure to the teams as well. Yeah. Next.
Oh, this is the second part of the principles. So once you follow the principles that Giovanni just described in order to reduce the mess, descale, and then test if you still really need to scale, once you have verified that you really still need to scale, all the principles in part 2 tell you how to scale, pointing us toward a direction to scale successfully. And the approach that is suggested by the principles in part 2 is to adopt an empirical approach. It's like being in a state of perpetual research and development on your own ways of working. And the key idea in this second part of the principles is to apply lean, agile, and complexity principles to the collaboration between teams. So you see, the traditional lean and agile frameworks focus on being agile inside the team. The idea here instead is to apply exactly the same approach, the same principles to the collaboration and coordination between different teams, different departments. So the first principle of this second part is about scaling the ability to collaborate effectively. People, indeed, are the most important and adaptable element of an organization. When you want to scale agility, achieve agility at scale, adopt agile at scale, what you can count on, first of all, is people, indeed. You know, scaled framework traditionally focus on very tangible things, things that they are easy to describe on PowerPoint during a training, things like roles, structure, processes. But all those things are less relevant for the success of your initiative to adopt agile at scale or to scale agility. What is really relevant is effective collaboration and relationships between teams and departments. Now, when I talk about collaboration, what does it mean really in practical terms? Let me make an example. Imagine that you have multiple teams or multiple departments working together to a shared initiative. They may have dependencies between them, or they may count of the work done from one team in order to help the other team. Collaborating and coordinating means coordinating their work, removing and relaxing dependencies, and managing the remaining dependencies. The way that the principles suggest to do this is through experimenting and finding the right way to collaborate and coordinate for each specific case, amplifying what is working well and sharing what's working with the rest of the organization. Now, many scaled frameworks suggest standard practices to collaborate and coordinate. Think about Scrum of Scrum. What we are saying is that that's not enough. You have to experiment and find out the best way to collaborate and coordinate by yourself, guided by these principles. The other principles that I want to talk about is principle number 6. So the idea here is to start small and make it work first. This is where you have to start. Don't start with the obsession of doing things at scale. Start, for example, at team level. And you know what? Start with one team and make it work until the team really works. Before that, in reality, you really have nothing to scale if you don't even have one single team that is working well. When we look at many of the organizations that achieved agility at scale successfully, we can see that many of those organizations started at team level indeed. Their adoption of Agile or agility started many times as an experiment driven bottom up by the people working on the team. After that, the organization noticed some success, and so later they started to think about being agile and develop agility at the whole organization level. This is when they added to the bottom-up drive also a top-down drive, and those things coming together. The last two principles that I want to share with you are about scaling with the gradual approach. I already mentioned the empirical approach. Let me tell you a little more what I mean. I mean making experiments on your own way of working, learning from the result that you get from those experiments, and then adapting and evolving your ways of working and your own practices accordingly. How do you experiment? Well, you can get a lot of inspiration from lean principles, from the Agile Manifesto, from the principles and the practices of the original frameworks, such as Kanban, extreme programming, lean software development, Scrum, and so on, and also guided by the theory and the principles of human complexity. If you look at the URL and the federated wiki that I shared with you before, and you look at principles 7 and 9, you will find many of those principles also from human complexity. And then indicators are important. Indicators can be qualitative as well as quantitative. And we should use indicators to see if what we are doing to scale is actually increasing our productivity or is even drawing down our productivity. One note of caution about indicators, especially metrics. Those indicators should be chosen by those that are doing the work, should be chosen and used by the teams that are actually doing the work. We do not want to have a top-down imposition of standard metrics imposed to all the teams. The other principles is presented by Giovanni.
Yeah, so this is, I think, the last principle we'll be talking about. This is something that is really hard to accept to too many managers and many senior stakeholders in projects. So that is scaling as always a hard limit. There is no way around that. So there is no way of scaling teams indefinitely to go faster. Just to give you an idea, I like to use extremes sometimes to crystallize ideas. You know, if there was no hard limit, putting in a team 500 people on day one, yeah, something could be done in 1 day instead of 1 year, yeah, something like this, which is obviously impossible. And now it's even more interesting than that. So let's look at this graph. This graph is qualitative, is illustrative purposes only, so don't take it as mathematically precise, yeah? So let's say that we want to measure the throughput per number of teams, so how many features they implement per unit of time. Now, interestingly, is when you have multiple teams, you have a situation that is what you've got, your project is a concurrent system, behaves in the same way it behaves as a normal concurrent multi-threaded program, if you like, or a parallel concurrent program. So this means that scalability is actually described mathematically by Amdahl's law. Now, I won't put the mathematics here, but basically what you get is that usually when there are teams added to a project, managers hope to have linear scalability. Yeah, we are able to do 50 features per month. We had one more with say 10 teams. We put 20 teams, and we go to 100 features per month, something like this. Actually, Amdahl's law tells us that there is a theoretical limit, which is an asymptotic limit here. Yeah, and the limit is actually the amount of is dictated by the amount of sequential work that needs to be done. In a case of a project with multiple teams, the sequential work is anything where teams need to synchronize or wait for each other. Yeah. So think about things like continuous integration environment setup or any other environment setup. People are waiting for that to work. Or teams changing the same files in the code base, and so one team needs to wait for the other one to be done in order to proceed. Pull requests are a typical one. Refinement of requirements that affect several teams. All these synchronization points and situations where some teams have to wait for others to finish. Yeah, though that is serial work. So what will end up in practice is that the reality will be much worse than the theoretical limit of Amdahl's law. And also, after you reach the limit, adding more teams will make the situation worse. So you can, what will happen is that the more teams, more people you add, the slower you'll go, and the worse the quality will be. Yeah. So one question could be, how do you know that the limit has been reached? Yeah. So unfortunately, there is no mathematical equations for this. So we cannot say, given these teams with these particular mathematical properties, this is how many you can get. But there are some things that can be done in an empirical manner. So one is look at before mentioned indicators. So, you know, metrics that tell you what is the throughput, the current throughput, that tell you what is the current quality level. One important thing thing about indicators is that you shouldn't look only at one of them in isolation. So if you look only at throughput, you may miss the fact that pushing the teams to deliver more features is increasing the number of defects. So probably having also indicators in terms that tell you how good the code quality is important. But also there are other things. So you know that you can ask your teams. So if a team is you know, are often waiting for others to do stuff, yeah, if you had a situation where several teams are waiting most of the time, you know that the limit has been reached already. Yeah, there is something going on there. The sequential work, synchronization work is taking its toll. But there are situations where sometimes teams are actually struggling to keep up. There is lots to do, and they say, look, we could do with a few more people or some other thing to take charge of this because this would allow us to go faster, to be more productive. So just asking the teams involved can give you some information about what the system, if the limits have been reached or not, and if you can scale up productively or not. Yeah. And so there are some things you can do. Unfortunately, it's not mathematically precise, but it's important. The most important thing to understand here is don't expect to be able to scale always, you know, indefinitely. you can do something empirically, even if there are no mathematical laws. There are tools at your disposal. The final thing is that to do this well requires hard work. Okay. Next.
I think we are ready to start the Q&A. So I'm sharing with you again in the chat the link to the federated wiki with the principles. Now we would like you to go to the Q&A in Pine and share with you your comments, your thought, or your question. Post your question in the Q&A tab. Vote the one that interests you more, and we will start answering your question and involving you in the conversation through the chat. So please go on the Q&A tab, and if you have questions, share it with us. We already see one question. We are giving you a little more time to add more questions if you want to.
We can start answering this one while people think about their questions. What do you think? So I can start, and maybe Luca, you can add your own bits. Yeah. So one important thing that I want to tell you is that all these principles are actually based, are not purely theoretical. So there is some theory, but they are also based on our own experience in projects. Yeah. So what I have is, I've seen failure stories of actually teams, projects not using these principles. So mostly attempting at using safe, less, double, this kind of agile, scaled frameworks that were in which they had to somehow force the project to cast their shape into the framework. I work with teams where I actually, before we came up with the principles, stating it this way, but let's say that Luca and I have been working along these lines for a long time, even if, separately, the principles are a result of our experiences. And so in my consulting work, I've actually worked with teams where I helped them to go into a direction that it was closer to these principles. Yeah, and they started to succeed more. So I still have to see teams that use these principles and failed. Surely I've got examples of some large-scale initiatives that when they started to work closer to an alignment to these kind of principles, actually improved their situation.
Yeah, I can add to Giovanni answer. I can add a link to the chat, and this link is an article that describes how many organizations that scaled agility successfully, how they did. And with scaling agility successfully, what I mean is being an organization that is fast, that is successful, customers love their products, and economically they are doing well and they are at the top of their market. So in those articles you can find a description of these organizations, and what you will notice is something that is very congruent with what Giovanni say and the principles that you describe. I think I see another question coming from Eduard. Oh, sorry, Raul. We both give you your question. Do you have any comments, any follow-up on the answer that we just give you to your question before we move on? Is there any additional comment that you want to add on the public chat? Or are you good with our answer? I guess Raul is okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's look at the next question from Edoardo Ponte. When you scale and you see a decrease in in quality, how do you descale?
Well, here the first thing to check is why you've got the decrease in quality. Yeah, because you need to check if it is related to scaling, to your decision to scale. Maybe you added one team and then you see a decrease in quality. You need to check if it is related to that or to something else. So this is the very first thing to do, because you may actually not know what is happening. One thing that happens is when you add teams, to see the real effect of the teams, you don't see that immediately. So what you will see initially might be often is a slowdown, yeah, a loss in productivity initially, and then if that was the right choice, then you'll see an increase again, because basically people need to go up to speed, yeah. But when you see a decrease in quality, really there is understanding why it is happening. So if you may find out that is directly related to the fact that you added one more team, and this team is actually interfering with another one. Basically, they share code and they keep stepping into each other's toes. You may want to actually roll back that decision. Yeah, just remove that team from the project. Yeah. Or if there are other reasons, you need to tackle them. So, for example, you can have a decrease in quality and you are scaling up, and at a time where the company is under pressure to deliver. So you may end up in a situation where the current teams are pushed to go faster, so to speak, and more teams are added to go even faster. So in that situation, the decrease in quality may be due partly to adding the new teams, but also partly to the fact that the existing ones have been pushed to go faster, and probably they are cutting corners. Okay, so the answer is not straightforward. It is always, you really need to check what is happening there. Yeah. So you may want to have a look at also not only at the system level, but the various teams, what is happening, if any of those have a decreasing quality in their own metrics, things like this. And then you need to take a decision based on that. Now, I know that is a bit of a, not very precise answer, but I cannot really give you a recipe there. The best recipe is look at the system, check the indicators, talk to your people, and see what is happening there. One word of caution is, if you are in an organization that is very command and control, people may be reluctant to tell you exactly what is happening. They may be afraid of telling you the truth. So that may complicate your situation even further.
Yeah. Eduardo, if you have, when you talk about quality, if you have anything specific in mind, feel free to detail that in the chat. But I will reinforce the answer from Giovanni. Very often there is more people than it is needed that is actually creating work or making things more difficult. So when you will talk with your team leaders or managers, they may identify people that actually is better if they focus on something else. The second element, and again, we are talking about things that happen commonly, dependencies have a huge role. Like part one and the dependency spiral that Giovanni described initially, that's a very common dynamic. So instead of accommodating dependencies and managing dependencies, for example, like the SAFe framework suggests, you should count on your technical people, look at the technical excellence, and see what can be done to break down those dependencies. Another thing that happens often, I know that Spotify had to deal with that. Many times we forget to coach, teach, help teams learn how to collaborate together. So even Spotify, that is often quoted as a great example, at some point they realized that they didn't put enough energy to coach teams to collaborate with each other. So that's also another element. Eduardo, I encourage you again to go on the chat and tell us if...
I think Eduardo had in the chat a comment question, well, actually it's a question. Could be also a challenge to stay at pace with automation and DevOps. I'm not sure I fully understand the question there. So does it mean that DevOps and automation actually can put pressure on the teams to do more for supportability, something like this? I'm not sure I understand the question, Eduardo. So if you can refine it a bit and maybe put in the Q&A, we can answer that as well.
Yeah. Let's say that often I'm also waiting, Eduardo, for you maybe to give us some more details, but often, yes, speeding up the release can make things harder, and people can struggle to keep up with the quality. The continuous delivery and the DevOps process should progress in terms of speed as much as your safety net are strong. For example, how effective is your automated testing? Can you really release things counting only on automated testing? And which techniques do you have in place to safely roll back things when something goes on? So it is like when a car is going faster. Adding power to the engine is one part, but having brakes that are as strong as the engine are also important. And so when we talk about DevOps and continuous delivery, having extremely good automated testing, having good monitoring system in place, and having safe to fail rollback plan, that is also important.
Okay, so it says related to training and usage of new techniques and technology. Yeah, well, basically using that is about the learning parts, if you like. Techniques and technology, they have an impact. I think that has definitely puts pressure on the teams, but there are also some aspects there that we need to keep in mind. So first of all, one thing that I'm very keen on is that operability requirements have to be first-class requirements. Yeah, it's not like in most systems they are an afterthought. Yeah, we need some logs stuff for the ops guys, but nobody allows them to actually tell you exactly what they need. Yeah. So in my view, the way I approach projects is they are first-class requirements. That's it. In terms of usage of new techniques and technology, that is a very good point, because this is another thing that is extremely important. Basically, when we create a new software system, there is always learning going on. We are not applying stuff that we know and by magic things work. So there is always an aspect of learning. There is the domain, but there is the technology, there are techniques for sure. So I have examples for my recent projects about that, the team learning about things about cloud, Terraform, and things, new languages that are more suitable for what we needed to do. And it's important for the team space to do that. Because if when planning what to deliver when, we need to have sufficient buffer there to allow the teams to learn in the process. Without that, you won't get a good system at all. So that is extremely important. It's yet another difficult thing because often there is this idea that people are there to produce and they, you just use the knowledge you have and do some magic, but never works that way. So it's an extremely good point.
Yeah. I'm passing to going to the next question about complexity principles. When you look at the principles on the website, you find a list. It goes beyond Kinevin. But on the chat now, I'm posting you some links that can give you some more references. Yes, Kinevin is a good starting point. Then there is another general element that is human complexity, and then many other principles, Gandalf and other principles that are mentioned on the website.
Yeah, and I think we are 20 seconds to.
Yeah, I think it's.
I don't know. If
you can contact us. If you have more questions, you can contact us. You have our links and contact here, and Giovanni and I, we will stay around for a while, so feel free to contact.
Yes, of course, feel free to contact us offline as well after the conference. Yeah. Okay, so we need to end the session now, so the next session will go on time. Thank you very much for joining us, and please, and we'll upload the slides very soon to Pine. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Bye.
Bye.